Coming to you from the Deep South, this is the Blue Collar Leadership Podcast. High impact leadership is not reserved for leaders, and it has nothing to do with your position, title, or rank. However, it does have everything to do with your character. It's time to climb to the next level and beyond, personally and professionally. Now, let's start making it happen with your host, Mac Story.
Hello, everyone. Max Story here today to talk to you on Christmas Eve. Yep, this episode's releasing on Christmas Eve 2021. So I want to go ahead and tell you if you're easily offended by someone talking about uh, religion or faith, that sort of thing, you just might want to go ahead and hit stop right here. But in honor of Christmas this year, 2021, Merry Christmas, by the way. I'm going to be speaking a little bit about my faith and a few of the lessons uh, that I share with people of faith when they talk to me about my blue collar leadership books. So if you don't know me, you may not realize I was agnostic most of my life, and so I didn't know what was true, and I started reading leadership books, personal growth and development books in 2008. Been reading them every day since. If you follow me, you've heard me say that probably 1,000 times. But what's interesting is once I started reading these books, I started realizing that a lot of these principles that I was reading about and now that I write about and speak about were based from the Bible. And so after 4 years of reading, when I first went to my first John Maxwell live event training, that first time I ever heard somebody speak about leadership in person, I've shared that story with you guys many times, and all I had done up to that point was purchase books, and then fast forward from 2008 to 2012, I decided I wanted to go uh, get certified to teach and speak on a lot of John Maxwell's content and get to hear him speak for 3 days. So I invested $5,000 of mine and Ria's money, and then also took my son Eric with me. That was another $5,000, and I had no idea when I went to that event that I would be leaving a Christian, but that's actually what happened. So I'll just share a little bit about that story. Uh, since it happened to be coming out on Christmas Eve, this episode. But yeah, I went down there to that training, went through a couple of days of training, and then John actually offered a church service. We were there through the weekend, so it was on a Sunday morning, and John actually told everyone, because there's people from all over the world, all different types of religions and things like that. A lot of people who maybe were not even religious. But he told them, everyone was welcome to come, and I just loved hearing John speak. So I was like, I don't care what he's talking about. I'm going to go and hear him speak. And it didn't offend me to go hear him talk about his religion and being a person of faith. And he was a pastor, for 25 years and that sort of thing. And he was there talking about Jesus. And this episode coming out, on Christmas Eve, that Christians, we celebrate the birth of Jesus Christ. And so this was around August 20th or 21st, something like that, in 2012, Sunday morning. I think that service started at 7 o'clock. We were going to have a normal leadership development day that day, and I went to that service, and John's just awesome to hear him talk about anything, and so I was really excited to just hear him talk about the Bible and the principles, and where he gets a lot of his teachings from, literally, and listen to him, do his lesson and talk about Jesus and faith, and it was great. Full of leadership principles, many that I were familiar with already. I just hadn't heard them in the context of the Bible. And so listen to that. And at the end, he wanted to do a prayer, and out of respect, even when I was agnostic, I would always bow my head when people were praying, just out of respect for the people. And so I bowed my head, and he went through the prayer, and then he said at the end, he said, everybody keep your head down, keep your head bowed, but if you haven't accepted Christ into your life, uh, please look up at me. And man, I didn't want to look up at him, but I had grown my integrity to a level that even though nobody would know it but me and my son Eric, we would know it, and so that we were not, Christians. So I raised my head up, and so did Eric, and looked up at John, along with it was ended up being about 80 or 100 other people in the room that day. It was a really large room full of people, but there was plenty of us who were not Christians looking up at John, and he started talking about Jesus Christ and accepting Christ as your Lord and Savior, and all that, all that type stuff. And then he said, any of you that would want to accept Christ into your life, just raise your hand and repeat after me. And that's what I did. So it was in 2012 when I became a Christian. I raised my hand, accepted Christ with John, and never saw that one coming. I never expected to do that, but apparently that's where I was led that day, and that's what I was supposed to do that day. And the next day, actually that day, I quit using profanity. I had already quit drinking alcohol about 4 months before that day, but that day I stopped using profanity as well. And I don't judge other people, but before I was a Christian, I used to know other people, obviously, who were Christians, and a lot of them they didn't act like they were Christians. And one reason it took me a long time to get there, because I saw a lot of people who professed to be one thing while they live life as another thing, and that just kind of always turned me off. But by that point, I had grown to a point that I wanted to be on that team. I had kind of been exploring, in that year in 2012, I was basically 40. I think actually it was right a day before or after my birthday that I raised my hand and accepted Christ, and I was turning 43. So it took me a long time to get there, but I did it. And then I didn't want to be one of those Christians that uses profanity nonstop. If I'm going to be a Christian, I want to be a good example of a Christian. And I hadn't seen a lot of good examples. I've seen plenty of people to say they were Christians, but I see them using profanity. I see them getting drunk, stumbling around, and I see them making bad choices and doing all kind of stupid things and look like everything but a Christian. And I'm not here to say I'm perfect, but I'm working hard to be a good example for people who do know I'm a Christian. I don't walk around and tell everybody I meet. And I do talk about this in my book, 10 Foundational Elements of Intentional Transformation, how to become your best self. That's one of the things I talk about in there, is choosing to become a Christian and choosing to stop using profanity, to take control of my anger issue. And now I don't have an anger issue, and stopping using alcohol. And I'll teach you a lesson, though. It's a mental road map to transformation. You can use it. You don't have to become a Christian to use it. But that's really the only book out of my 14 books where I really talk about faith and God and being a Christian and kind of my journey. I just wanted to share some with you today because it's Christmas Eve when this episode's coming out. Usually I record them pretty far in advance, but I'm actually recording this one on December the 13th, pretty close up to when it's going to come out, a couple weeks in advance. We've been super busy this year. But the other thing I did after that was, another thing I knew about Christian people was I talked to a lot of them, and quite a few of the Christian people I talked to had never read the Bible. That always confused me. And I didn't want to be one of those guys either. So first thing I did was I started reading the Bible. And actually Ria's grandfather gave me a student version of the Bible, which, if you haven't read the Bible, that means it's a complete Bible, but then there's a whole lot of text inside of it that helps you interpret, whatever the Bible's saying on any given page or in a verse or a chapter or a book or whatever you want to call it. So I read that thing. I opened that cover. I read everything on the front cover, the back cover, everything between the covers in the entire student version of the Bible. Took me about a year or so. I'm a slow reader. Plus, there was a lot of extra in there. And in a way, I almost wish I wouldn't have read the student version, because there was a lot of interpretation. And when somebody's interpreting, you don't know if what they're interpreting is right or not, because it's their interpretation. And I have my own interpretation. And then there's also, what does the Bible say? So anyway, I read the entire Bible. I want to make sure that I wasn't drinking alcohol, I wasn't using profanity, and I had read the Bible. Got those three things locked down. Doesn't make me perfect, again, by no means, but I won't be one of those people that does drink alcohol or does use profanity or hasn't read the Bible, but runs around telling everybody I'm a Christian. So I don't do that anyway. But it's just part of my character growth. I wanted to be a good model. But when it comes to blue collar leadership, if you're a person of faith, I assume maybe you are, either you're thinking about it or you're just curious about me if you're still listening, 10 minutes into this podcast. But when I talk to people about my brand, blue collar leadership, and I know they're people of faith, I share with them that all these principles come from the Bible. And if you're a person of faith, you probably already know that. If you're not a person of faith, I can still tell you they come from the Bible. These principles are in a lot of other historical texts as well, because they're principles related to how to be positive. But I give credit to them coming from the Bible, same way as John Maxwell does, and a whole lot of other people. And actually, that day I raised my hand and accepted Christ, John gave me an autographed copy of his Maxwell Leadership Bible. So that was pretty cool, because in that Bible, he breaks it down. A lot of the stuff he teaches about leadership and personal growth, there's little text boxes within that Bible where he teaches, his secular version of what comes from the Bible, and he'll tie it to, what verse, what chapter and what verse it came from. So that's pretty neat. I go through that from time to time, and really went through it a lot back at that time. But back to the blue collar leadership piece. Again, when I'm talking to people of faith, and I'll say the greatest leader to ever walk the face of the earth was a blue collar leader. He was a carpenter, and it was Jesus Christ. It's pretty awesome when you think about it. And I think about my brand. When I actually wrote the first book in this series, which was Blue Collar Leadership, Leading from the Front Lines, I hadn't really thought about it intentionally, maybe subconsciously, but I hadn't really thought about it being biblically based and being related to Jesus Christ in any kind of way or anything like that. But as I've grown in my faith over time, I've thought about it, and I'm like, man, this is a pretty cool brand, blue collar leadership, full of principles from the Bible. Even though I don't talk about it and I don't tie them to the Bible, it doesn't matter where they are. I don't care any good principle. I don't care where it comes from. I'm going to get in alignment with it and do my best to follow it. And I mean, that's what led me to becoming a Christian. The first 4 years of my growth, I was becoming aligned with Christian-based principles, and they're based again. In a lot of the same principles are in multiple religions. I just happen to have read the Bible and followed John Maxwell, who is a pastor and obviously teaches and preaches from the Bible. You may be a person of some different type of faith, and you may know these same principles from another source. And again, I don't care where the principles come from. I don't care who says it. I don't care what type of person they are. If it's good stuff, I'm going to capture that nugget and put it in my mind, and I'm going to try to live by it. But those principles led me to become a person of faith. Eventually, these principles started causing me to live my life in a way that was aligned with Christianity. And then I started looking around and started thinking about all the different people. And, I thought there were a lot of really good people who were Christians. There were also a lot of really bad people who said they were Christians. So I was kind of torn and all that. But I decided to join that team and become a person of faith and a believer in Jesus Christ. And I kind of had always believed in Jesus, even when I was agnostic, because, he was a real person. And obviously, he had the influence over thousands of years. I mean, that's what leadership is. Leadership is influence. And, I'm talking again to people of faith, and I'll share it here on this Christmas Eve edition of my podcast. But John teaches leadership is influence. I've never heard him teach what I'm about to teach, but I've shared it with some people who know John and are people of faith, and they like, if John ever heard that, he'd start teaching and talking about it just like you do. And again, I don't do it all the time, but I only do it really when I'm speaking to people of faith. And I assume, again, if you're still listening, you're probably a person of faith and potentially a Christian. But John's principle, leadership is influence. He says nothing more, nothing less. When you think back to the way God created everything, I mean, he created the animals, and the animals have these programs inside of their mind, how they're just programmed to do all these things naturally. Birds know when to migrate, where to go, how to get back. Whales, they do the same thing. They go all over the ocean. Butterflies, I mean, all kind of creatures do all kind of things, basically because they're programmed that way. But relative to leadership being influence, God basically modeled the principle. That principle, he modeled it for us. He created it from the beginning of time. He could have made all of us follow him, but he didn't. He gave us free will. And he basically modeled leadership as influence, basically saying to us, if I can't influence you to follow me or influence you through someone else to follow me, I'm going to love you all the way to hell, but I ain't going to get you on my team. He could have just made it all simple and said, hey, I'm going to program the people to follow me, and that's just the way it's going to be. But he didn't. He really created that model that principle that leadership is influence. And that's what we teach. Rhea and I teach. A lot of other people like John Maxwell and many, many other people teach and feel the same thing. Leadership is influence. And it doesn't matter if you're a person of faith. Leadership's still influence. But because I am a person of faith and a Christian, I give credit to that for God, and I can take it back and kind of paint that picture of why. Why is leadership influence? How did it start? I mean, it goes all the way back to the beginning. But even if you're not a person of faith, whoever's got the most influence at any given time for any given reason in any given moment is always the leader. Whoever has the most influence. It doesn't matter their title, their position, and it can change. In 5 minutes, 5 different people could be the leader. Depends on what's going on. But whoever the people are following is always the leader. The people in a group, whoever they're following, that person is the leader. If the formal authority leader asks a question in a group, whoever answers that question has the opportunity to influence the entire group. It may be imagine just a simple explanation. 4 people out hiking. You kind of get to a certain spot, you don't know which way to go. Somebody says, which way do we go? Everybody rattles off of their thoughts, they rattle off a direction. But the person who gave the information that everyone acted on, whichever direction everyone decides to go, whoever came up with that idea, that person was the leader. And sometimes the leadership is a group thing, right? Maybe 4 people said 4 different things, but then these people discussed it. And then they decided together. It was a group decision. So in that sense, everyone's a leader and everyone's a follower. Everyone had influence and everyone chose to follow everyone else's input and come to a group decision. But leadership's influence. So that's about all I'm going to share with you today about that. But I'm still on my spiritual journey. I'm still learning. But ultimately, I mean, I started this journey, 4 years before I became a Christian. 2012, I raised my hand, became a Christian. But 2008 is when I started really intentionally living and aligning myself with these biblical based principles. And my life started getting better, 4 years in advance of me raising my hand. I was already getting better. And then I raised my hand and accepted Christ and started getting better even more intentionally. And then I read the Bible cover to cover. I think the year after that, I was baptized. So I've been continuing my journey. But the biggest thing for me, to share with you today, a closing lesson is everybody's a role model, whether you're a person of faith or whether you're not. And it doesn't matter which faith you are, or again, if you're not a person of faith, you are a role model. People are watching you. The question is not, are you a role model? The question is always, what kind will you be? So, relative to how I'm trying to live my life, I try to model all the things I teach and speak about and write about. I want to be a leader worth following. I hope as you celebrate Christmas and you move into 2022. Everybody has their New Year's resolutions. Don't make it a resolution. Just make it a way of being. Kind of dedicate to yourself that you want to become a leader worth following more intentionally. You may already be a leader worth following, but be more intentional about it, and you'll have more people following you. And the ultimate goal, it's not about us, but it starts with us, is that we want to grow and develop other people. The exact same thing Jesus did. He didn't judge people. He just wanted to help people. He wanted to help them have a better life. And in his case, an eternal life with the Lord. My main goal is to help you have a better life at home and at work. As far as your faith goes, you need to find somebody else to help you with that. I'm not an expert on that. But whether you become a person of faith or not, the stuff that I teach you, the stuff I write about, talk about, if you apply it, your life's going to get better at home and at work. And when it does, I hope you're willing to make the sacrifices that you need to make in your life to help other people have a better life at home and at work. So if you listen to this on Christmas Eve, Merry Christmas. Hope you have a safe and enjoyable holiday season. Talk to you next time.
Make it happen or someone else will. It might as well be you. Are you serious about taking your career and your life to the next level and beyond? Check out Mac Story's Blue Collar Leadership series books and others, now available on audio, along with paperback and ebooks at Amazon, iTunes, and Audible. Please visit bluecollarleadership.com to learn about Mac's books, programs, special offers, certifications, and more. Thank you for listening to the Blue Collar Leadership Podcast.